Hello and welcome to a conversation with, well, a panel of expert skeptical investigators. This is part of my interview series for skeptical activists and science communicators for my Skeptical Inquirer online column. Normally, I do these interviews with just a single individual, but it turns out today I have a bevy of guests who have all agreed to discuss a topic of mutual and personal interest, the recent and ongoing drone scare of 2024. Joining me are Robert Bartholomew, Brian Dunning, and Benjamin Radford. Hello, everyone. I'm going to read a little bio of you all. So, Robert Bartholomew is an author, a medical sociologist, and a recognized expert in the arena of social panics and mass psychogenic illness. I don't know what that has to do with drones, but we'll see. I previously interviewed on the subject of Havana syndrome, as well as about the claimed Iranian schoolgirl mass poisonings of about 2 years ago. Brian Dunning is an author, the producer of the long-running Skeptoid podcast, and a documentary filmmaker with 4 skeptically themed films under his belt. I believe it's 4. I previously interviewed him about 2 of those, including the most recent one, the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See. And lastly, but not leastly, Benjamin Radford is an author, investigator, and a skeptic. He's authored, co-authored, or contributed to over 20 books and written over 1,000 articles, that boggles my mind, and columns on a wide variety of topics, including unexplained mysteries, the paranormal, critical thinking, and, again, mass hysteria. He's the host of Squaring the Strange podcast and the deputy editor, I believe, of Skeptical Inquirer, which I write for. And here's a little trivia. I wouldn't be here interviewing any of these people if it wasn't for Ben. He's the one who offered me a job to write for Skeptical Inquirer way back in 2018. So, why do I have these 3 particular guests on today? They've all been writing about the drone claims and the drone hysteria ever since this story broke. I think it's about 3 weeks ago and has not let up yet. And for the record, we're recording this on December 19th. And let me say, my personal interest in this story is that I am here at Drone Ground Zero in New Jersey. Wherever I go, people I know say they have either seen drones, their friends have seen drones, and they know they're real because what other explanation can they be? They're all over the local TV reports, and if they're on the TV reports, they have to be real. They're all on social media. Every 5th TikTok I see is now about drones. And, my friends conclude that they have to be real. What are they up to? Why are they here? What's going on? Why are they threatening us? So let me ask my guests, should I move to my underground bunker or maybe relocate to New Zealand where Robert Bartholomew is, where it's going to be safer? What do you think?
I think we all wish you'd go to an underground bunker and just lock the door.
Thank you, Brian.
I, I don't think you've got a whole lot to worry about, but we'll see what my fellow panelists have to say.
Okay, so as let's see, this is from Russ Dobler, who is the head of the New York City Skeptics, and I asked for questions for you guys, and the last time I looked, he was the only one to put one, but I'm going to read it because it's apropos. People in New Jersey are, of course, used to seeing planes and other lights in the sky regularly, and he says that because we have many big airports around here, the ones from New York and then the one right in New Jersey. A lot of folks will find it hard to believe that these people suddenly are making all misidentifications. How do you folks reconcile that? How could people be wrong? Who wants to start?
Well, can I just say then that New Jersey, that region has one of the heaviest flight paths in the world. And when you get social panics, they typically start with a initial sensational case, gets reported on social media or in the media, and now people are scrutinizing the skies like they've never done before. And they start to redefine an array of phenomena reflective of what their expectation is. So part of this, I think, is that, yeah, there's been drones and there's always lights in the night, and people don't pay that much attention. But now, given the media coverage, people are scrutinizing the skies, and because eyewitness testimony is very unreliable and subject to error, we are prone to seeing things that aren't there, a la the face on Mars or Jesus on a tortilla chip, right? We are very fallible creatures.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I mean, to follow up on what Bob said, I mean, a big part of this, and we'll talk more about this later, is the psychology of confirmation bias and expected attention, right? If you tell people to look for something in the waters of Loch Ness, anything weird that's a log, a beaver, anything that for any reason whatsoever or no reason at all somebody thinks is weird is going to be the Loch Ness monster. Same thing with if it's Bigfoot or Mothman in the woods or whatever else. And so people should not sort of underestimate the power of those. And in terms of people, and I've heard that argument before, like, well, these people, they see these things all the time. Well, here's the thing: they may or may not see them all the time. First of all, second of all, they're not paying attention to them. And I see the same thing, for example, and I'm going to make a left turn here in ghost investigations, where somebody will go into a location, and because it is reputed to be haunted, that's why they're there. They're there because they're ghost hunters, and they're going to spend 4 hours or 6 hours or overnight in some allegedly haunted location. And in the context of a reputedly haunted house, the things that would otherwise pass unnoticed and be unremarkable, such as a cold draft late at night, or a sound, or something scurrying, is reinterpreted as something that's unusual. So that's part of the answer.
I wonder if it's necessary for there to have been a triggering event this.
I was going to ask that, Brian. Does anybody know if there was a triggering event in the news?
I have tried to find one and I haven't found one. But I mean, in my experience, maybe it was a drone. Maybe it doesn't have to have been, though. It has to be anything that someone thought might have been a drone. You know, I don't now, but I used to live under an airport pattern, and there's so many planes going over every night that they're just not even in your consciousness anymore. You just don't even notice them. And if you happen to hear one and look up and it looks weird, well, that's not a plane. That must be a drone. I mean, it could have been that. I don't have no idea. When a drone does go over, I mean, they're usually pretty low. If you can see their lights, they're pretty darn close because they're small. And the buzz is probably audible. I think it'd be hard to mistake a drone. If you don't hear it, I doubt it's a drone unless there's a lot of traffic noise or something.
My
Yeah,
other,
I think I was just gonna say, think the other aspect that sort of gets lost, and I wrote a little bit about this, was that this is, and Bob will talk about this more. This is a recurring thing. This is old wine in new bottles. 5 years ago in 2019, there was exactly an identical drone scare, not in the West Coast, but over in Nebraska and Colorado. And I wrote about that in Skeptical Inquirer. And again, it's the same thing. It was literally 5 years ago this month, and it was the same story. What are those weird things? People are freaking out for whatever reason, and then it goes away. And
Now,
as
so
Bob will talk on, these have happened. There's nothing new about this. That's
yeah,
what I keep trying to explain to people. There's nothing new about this.
Robert wrote it, and I just recently read Lessons from the Drone Scare of 2019 in Psychology Today, and I had never heard of that. So I'm wondering if the people out there where that happened are not even hearing about the New Jersey one, or is this a bigger deal and it is now spreading?
well, what's interesting here is that history never repeats itself, but it rhymes. And you go back in time and you've got these scares going on over and over and over again. And we don't really seem to heed the lessons. And a good example here is the Loch Ness Monster or the Lake Champlain Monster, where, for example, on Lake Champlain, you will get months go by without a sighting. Then there will be a major report and a flurry of sightings. And if the Lake Champlain Monster and the Loch Ness Monster exist, they're supposedly plesiosaurs or zooglodons. These are forms of primitive whales and creatures that are mammals. They're air breathing. So they should be coming up for air at regular intervals. And so there should be a lot more sightings spaced out over time, but you don't get that. These sightings tend to go with the media. The same with Bigfoot, the same with chupacabras. They tend to go in waves triggered by an initial sensational report. Doesn't matter whether it was real or whatever triggered it. As long as it makes it into the media and now social media, now people are scrutinizing their environment to find evidence of this or to confirm or deny. And that is a major trigger of these outbreaks that just keep happening over and over again.
I saw a reel, and I don't remember if it was Instagram or Facebook. It doesn't matter, but it was a woman saying she was at the shore in Jersey, pointing her camera up in the dark sky, and oh, there's a line of light that has to be the drones. And what actually was impressive is then she pointed it straight up, and she goes, "And look at those; they're all tiny and they're following each other." And she counted them out loud, one, two. She got up to 20. It's freaking Starlink, and this is out there as this is evidence of look at the stream of drones going over New Jersey.
I think that was probably the Starlink launch that was going on in Oregon, because if you remember near the beginning of this, it didn't get nearly as big in the news, but there was pilots in Oregon are reporting seeing UFOs, and they're describing exactly what they saw and everything. And these are all commercial pilots, and then several other commercial pilots reported the same thing. So it was kind of a miniature little drone hysteria, but it was UFOs and it was only commercial pilots, and so it didn't stay in the news as long. And I mean, the guys on Metabunk, it was announced, like it was reported which flights these pilots were on, and so they pointed out they found exactly where these planes were, exactly what direction they were pointing, exactly when they were, and yes, they were pointed directly into a patch of sky that was where the Starlinks were flaring.
So you mentioned Metabunk. For people who don't know what that is, Brian, explain.
Starlink flare. So, well, any satellite flare, when satellites are going
So
on.
Metabunk. You said Metabunk. So what is Metabunk for
Oh, I'm
people?
sorry, Metabunk. Metabunk.org.com. One or the other. That's a great forum where some of the guys on that are literally the world's best experts. Mick West started the forum. The guy I'm talking about is a user named Flarky, who is one of the best guys at tracking something down to the square inch where this was on the Earth when it was reported, and what airplanes were in what position, what stars and planets were where. It's incredible the amount of data that they get, and then everything can be recreated in Mick's software, the SITREC tool. So you get a whole virtual recreation where everything's geospatially accurate. You can view it from different angles, and you can see exactly what the pilots saw. So, all this data is publicly accessible, all the plane data you can get, and you can get all the satellite data, and you can find out where satellites are going to be flaring at any particular time. That's exactly where these pilots were all looking.
And
So-
I was going to say, I think part of what's going on here in terms of why it's really blown up is that the whole thing has been democratized, right? You don't need to be you don't need to be a NASA scientist. You don't need to be a net. All you need is to have a cell phone on you and be outside. And wherever you are on the Earth, you will see something. You will see bright lights in the sky.
And I think that's why the Oregon one died out so quickly.
Yeah.
It wasn't democratized. You had to be a commercial pilot.
Right. In this case, anybody
Wait.
can go outside and
Explain
see
that to me, guys. I
weird,
missed
and there's fodder for it.
Why is that different? Why was that different out there? Why is the sightings out west different from the New Jersey ones again? Why did you say you had to be a commercial?
UFO sightings in Oregon were being reported by commercial airline pilots.
So nobody on the ground took it up and started seeing them also then?
None of the reports that I saw ever mentioned anyone on the ground seeing these things. They should have been able to. I mean, the patch of the sky where satellites would have been flaring was in relatively the same position for people in airplanes as for people on the ground.
But again, maybe they accurately recognized it and it wasn't a big deal, so it didn't get reported.
I think they just said, "Oh, you got to be a pilot to see these things," and so they didn't even bother going out and looking themselves.
Okay.
Whereas in New Jersey, it's everyone and their dog is seeing drones flying over the sky, flying over their house and directly over the airport.
I was just saying, this is one thing that's baffled me since day one. Is you have people who are like, when you get into like what people think these things are, right? And I've had a couple of discussions. People like, what do you think is going on? Well, of course, there's all the theories, it's aliens, this, that, and then and one guy said, like, I'm pretty sure it's like, it's CIA spy drones. And I said, what is so important about your backyard at 2 a.m? What do you think the CIA wants to know about your backyard? I'm like,
I can answer that.
Well, they're gathering information. Like, what?
But Ben, but my answer there, by the way, is why would they have the freaking lights on?
Right.
I can answer that too. The conspiracy theories that are going around are saying that this is a government false flag information. The government is deliberately flying these drones to acclimate people to having drones all over because
What?
when the deep state makes its final move, that's how they're going to do it.
What?
Something along
What's the
those lines.
final move? What does that mean?
You know, who knows? Collect us all into concentration camps for orderly disposal. Who I have no idea what the
Is
conspiracy.
Rob, it's the same thing they're doing for chemtrails. They've been poisoning our skies for decades now, and look at us now. Clearly a result of chemtrails.
So there's a fringe New Jersey group in my area, which I have attended in person several times. And they're ever since the first report, they report everything, Bigfoot, UFOs, chemtrails. But ever since the first report of this has been the only topic on their Facebook page. And I'm looking at it right now. I'm going to put a little clip up when I edit this. And their latest one is, where are the drones of New Jersey coming from? Give me your best guess. And the choices are, they're coming from a nation adversarial to the USA, Russian, Iran, China, of course. They're part of a covert US military operation, which I think is what we said. They're from a secretive transnational cabal. They're from an extraterrestrial or non-human civilization with advanced technology, or I have another explanation and please add it to the comments. So of course I did that one. I'm expected to be banned from the group shortly because I put of all the things you've been writing there as in the comments.
I would love to continue down the path of talking about how silly this is, but that's not very useful. I would be more interested in, it's hard to tell people that, oh, this is a case of mass hysteria or whatever the best term is. So I would like to ask you, Robert, what is the best term for this? Is this a social contagion? Is it what is actually the term for what we're going on? And what's a more common example of that people
Well,
might
social contagion would be the word,
Okay.
and a social panic, in a way. People say collective delusion, mass delusion, true, but not in the psychiatric sense, in the social sense. And what I find interesting is, why do some stories suddenly take off and they just blow up, and others die out very quickly? And I think part of that is there's two overlapping moral panics that are going on in the United States right now. There's always a moral panic going on, but one of them has to do with the fear of foreigners, right? The migrant crisis, which there's a crisis at the southern border. There's a grain of truth in that. And as a result of that, there is this xenophobia, this fear of foreigners. And as a result, what you're seeing is a projection of collective prevailing fears, right? It's the Iranians or it's the Chinese sending drones from some ship off the coast. And as Rob alluded to, why would they have flashing lights and stuff like this if they're doing this? And the other moral panic that's been going on for many decades has to do with the fear of new technologies and what they could do. In the late 1800s, you had the telephone when it first came out. People were claiming to get sick from just talking on the phone, or when ice cubes came out in the 1920s and 30s, people claimed to get sick because it was artificially created. You've got video display terminals. You've got mobile phones, Wi-Fi, 5G, right?
Well, wasn't
And
there something
so
called
there's this-
whiplash spine from people who are on trains going more than 10 miles an hour? I don't recall that.
That was railway spine in the UK back in the late 1800s. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of these things. And I think because of particularly the xenophobia, this just takes right off. It must be the drone scare back in 2019 in the Midwestern US, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas. That scare, popular belief at the time was it was Iranian agents.
When you said 2019, I thought you were talking about the U.S. Navy ships off the coast of Southern California, basically all sitting under the LAX traffic pattern, and the guys running around on the decks with the cameras, the Snoopy crews. And for a period of weeks, there was half a dozen or so Navy ships that believed they were being swarmed by drones. And again, it is the exact same situation as we had with New Jersey. Whenever one of these reports and whenever there was photos or video was released and we had enough information to know where and when it was taken, it always matched up directly with a commercial airline flight overhead. And yet
Well,
the U.S. Navy didn't figure this out.
let me, this is apropos to this. So I have a little part here. I'm going to talk about what's the harm in this. Oh, people believe in drones. Who cares? But my congressman, U.S. congressman, is Republican Chris Smith, and he called for the drones to be shot out of the sky. I'm going to read this from an article in my local paper here. 6 days ago, U.S. Congressman Chris Smith quoted as saying, "We have the capability to shoot them now, but to do it in a place where there would not be any threat to anybody on the ground. Just do it. They're over the ocean sometimes, and they're over bodies of water. There are ways of doing it in this sophisticated approach that's aggressive and will put it to rest." Also, regarding the reports from Navy ships, also Smith held a joint hearing by the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Law Enforcement, and Intelligence and Subcommittee on Transportation and Maritime Security, which was called Safeguarding the Homeland from Unmanned Aerial Systems. And Smith told the FBI and the Department of Justice that at the hearing, a commanding officer in the New Jersey Coast Guard reported that his 47-foot ship was followed by between 12 and 30 of these drones as they went through the water. I don't know if that means the ship or the drones went through the water, and they were following right behind my ship. Yep.
Too
So,
bad they didn't provide video along with those.
yeah.
Every time they did, it was clearly nothing like that. In fact, the videos that were, some of the logs were released, or not released, but they were retrieved from with a FOIA request. And they gave the elevation and the direction. And curiously, all of the ones that had that were at the horizon. So they were probably just seeing other ships off in the distance. I had this experience myself on a cruise in the, I mean, we all do this basically the same kind of thing for a living. And yet I was on a cruise in the Caribbean, and we're standing on the top deck of a ship, and I'm just seeing this thing that I couldn't believe because it was impossible. And my friends say, "What's going on?" I say, "Look at that light out there. There's this weird light out at the horizon going way up and way down and way up and way down, almost like it's going, like it's a, what's their word for transmedium going down in the ocean." It was just a friggin' light or a star or something, and the ship was rocking. And my perspective fooled me, even though this is literally what I do for a living, and was able to be fooled. So could these teenagers on board these U.S. Navy ships have also been fooled by the same thing? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, in your movie, the UFO movie they don't want you to see, I mean, you interview people who are air traffic controllers, right? And they make it clear that pilots aren't any better observers of these things than your average person on the street.
No, making mistakes all the time, landing at the wrong airport, calling in Starlinks as UFOs.
And people just will not believe that, though.
No, pilots are inerrant. It's impossible for a pilot to be mistaken about anything they see in the sky.
It's the same
go ahead.
also with the police, right? It's like, oh, it's the police, so it must be true.
Yeah.
They're trained observers. No, they're not. They're just like everybody else. We are all fallible. Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.